There is something profoundly unsettling about getting exactly what you wished for. In the Season 1 finale of Fionna and Cake, our protagonist achieved the impossible. She proved her existence was valid. She made her universe canonical. She stood before cosmic entities and demanded recognition. And against all odds, she won. Her world would not be erased. Her life would not be deleted. She became, for all intents and purposes, real. And yet, Season 2 opens not with triumph, not with celebration, not with the satisfaction of a battle won, but with the quiet devastation that follows when you realize that being real means being responsible for every mess you are about to make. Fionna Campbell enters her second season carrying the invisible weight of a hero who never asked to become one. She saved her world from erasure. She fought alongside Simon Petrikov across dimensions and emerged victorious against the Scarab, a cosmic enforcer who wanted nothing more than to wipe her entire reality from existence. By every measurable standard, she should be thriving. She should be riding high on the momentum of her success. She should be building a life worthy of the reality she fought so hard to protect. Instead, we find her struggling to pay rent, chasing an ex-boyfriend who has clearly moved on, forgetting basic responsibilities and sabotaging relationships before they have a chance to begin. The heroic Fionna of Season 1 has given way to someone who seems incapable of functioning in the very world she saved. This is the genius of what showrunner Adam Muto and his team have constructed with Season 2. They refuse to let Fionna rest on her laurels, because rest is not what broken people do. Rest requires a kind of internal peace that Fionna has never possessed, could never possess, because the foundation of her existence was corrupted from the start. Her entire being was fabricated as wish fulfillment, first by Simon Petrikov in his Ice King madness, then shaped further by the cosmic entity Prismo. She was written to be perfect, to solve problems effortlessly, to have romance fall into her lap without complication or consequence. Her original adventures, those stories Ice King told to anyone who would listen, were power fantasies where everything worked out because the narrative demanded it work out. And now that her universe has become real, now that causality actually applies, she must contend with the devastating truth that she was never given the psychological tools to handle genuine struggle. The opening episodes established this dissonance with painful precision. Fionna throws herself into saving Gary and Marshall Lee's bakery, the Sweet Spot, from demolition by the antagonistic property developer Queenie. On the surface, this seems like classic hero behaviour. A friend is in trouble, and Fionna responds. She organises, she plans, she sacrifices her own time and energy for others. But watch her face during these scenes. Watch the desperation that leaks through her determination. Notice how she talks about the mission, how she frames it in cosmic terms, how she assigns world-ending significance to whether a small bakery survives or fails. Fionna is not saving the Sweet Spot because she has a deep passion for local business, or even because she loves her friends that much. She is saving it because she needs to prove that her heroism in Season 1 was not a fluke. She needs external validation, that she matters, that her existence has purpose, that she is not just a mistake the universe made when it accidentally legitimized Ice King's fantasies. This is what psychologists would call an external locus of control taken to its pathological extreme. Fionna cannot generate self-worth internally. She has no mechanism for it. Her entire sense of identity is contingent upon other people recognizing her value through her actions. When she saves someone, she briefly feels valid, briefly feels like her existence has justification. When she fails to save someone, or worse, when someone saves themselves without her involvement, she spirals into existential crisis. We witness this pattern repeat throughout the season, with escalating consequences, each failure driving her to more desperate attempts at heroism, each success proving somehow insufficient to fill the void inside her. She is a hamster on a wheel, running faster and faster toward a destination that does not exist, and the show forces us to watch her exhaust herself in real time. The parallel narrative running through Season 2 belongs to Huntress Wizard, and her presence illuminates everything that Fionna lacks. Huntress Wizard operates from an entirely different psychological framework, one built not on external validation, but on internal code. She is a creature of the wild, raised after tragedy by the forest itself, shaped by solitude and self-reliance into something that barely resembles the social creatures around her. When Huntress Wizard encounters a problem, she does not ask whether solving it will make her feel worthwhile. She does not need the problem to validate her existence. She simply solves it because it needs solving, because solving problems is what she does, because her identity is rooted in action rather than reaction. The showrunners have essentially given us two protagonists who represent opposite ends of a psychological spectrum, and watching them struggle to understand each other becomes one of the season's most rewarding through lines. Fionna cannot comprehend how Huntress Wizard can be so indifferent to recognition. Huntress Wizard cannot comprehend why Fionna needs so much approval from others. They are speaking different emotional languages, and the translation errors between them generate both comedy and tragedy in roughly equal measure. Neither approach is presented as entirely healthy, which is the show's great wisdom. Huntress Wizard's extreme self-reliance has made her emotionally stunted in ways that nearly cost Finn his life. Fionna's extreme other reliance has made her incapable of basic adult functioning. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the middle, in a territory neither character knows how to reach. What makes Season 2 particularly devastating is its willingness to let Fionna be genuinely unpleasant. In previous Adventure Time content, Fionna was a fantasy figure, a cool and competent and romantically desirable heroine who existed primarily as wish fulfillment for both the in-universe storytellers and the audience watching at home. The show acknowledged that her existence came from Ice King's imagination, but it never truly interrogated what that would mean for her psychology, what it would feel like to discover that you were designed to be perfect by someone who had no idea what perfection actually required. Season 2 does the work that was always implied but never shown. It asks the question that haunts anyone who was created to be flawless and then placed in a world full of flaws. The answer, as Fionna demonstrates episode after episode, is chaos. She pursues DJ Flame despite knowing he has a girlfriend, ignoring boundaries that any emotionally healthy person would recognize. She neglects her friendship with Cake in favor of increasingly desperate heroic gestures, treating her best friend like a sidekick rather than a partner. She forgets to pay rent, misses crucial meetings, lies to people who love her, and destroys things she claims to be protecting. Each failure compounds the next because Fionna cannot process failure at all. She was never written to fail. Her original stories resolved cleanly with minimal effort on her part. The narrative always bent to accommodate her success. Reality, with its messy compromises and permanent consequences, is a language she was never taught to speak, and she is trying to navigate a foreign country without a phrasebook. There is a moment early in the season when Fionna meets Hunter, the human version of Huntress Wizard, who exists in her own mundane world. Hunter is everything Fiona might have been if circumstances were different. She is grounded, competent, and comfortable in her own skin. She does not need to perform heroism because she has internalized a stable sense of self. She helps people not because helping validates her existence, but because helping is good and she wants to do good things. Watching Fiona interact with Hunter is like watching someone confront the life they might have lived if their psychological development had not been sabotaged from the start. Fiona does not know whether to befriend Hunter, compete with her, or run away from the comparison, so she does all three, often in the same scene, her behaviour oscillating wildly as her unstable self tries to process an encounter with stability. This psychological complexity elevates Season 2 beyond simple entertainment into something approaching genuine insight. The show is conducting a serious examination of identity formation and what happens when that formation is corrupted by external forces. Fiona did not choose to exist. She did not choose her personality or her circumstances or the gaps in her emotional education. She was manufactured by traumatized minds to fulfill their fantasies, and the fantasies they had did not include teaching her how to be a complete person. Now, she must somehow construct an authentic self from raw material that was never meant to support authenticity. She must learn to be real after spending her entire existence as a story someone else was telling. The task is impossible, and the show knows it, and Fiona knows it too, somewhere beneath all her desperate performing. The task is impossible, but she has to try anyway, because the alternative is admitting that she was never meant to exist at all. The second episode of the season carries a title that operates on multiple levels of meaning. The Crocodile Who Bit a Log refers on its surface to a fable about mistaken identity, about attacking something you believe to be one thing when it is actually another entirely. The crocodile sees the log floating in the water, mistakes it for prey, and bites down with all its considerable force, only to discover that what seemed like opportunity was actually obstacle, that what looked like sustenance was actually splinters and broken teeth. But as the episode unfolds, we realize the title applies to virtually every character we encounter. Everyone in Season 2 is biting logs. Everyone is fighting battles against enemies that do not exist while ignoring the threats that do. Finn the human lies dying in ooh, poisoned by consequences that trace back to Season 1. The heart of the forest was damaged during the multiverse crisis, and that damage has manifested as a creeping death spreading through Finn's body. He is comatose, suspended between life and whatever comes after, while those who love him scramble to find a cure that may not exist. The situation is urgent. Every moment that passes brings Finn closer to a death that would devastate everyone who knows him. And yet, despite the urgency, despite the stakes that could not possibly be higher, the characters surrounding him keep getting distracted by smaller concerns, keep biting logs when the actual crocodile is right there in the water with them. Princess Bubblegum throws herself into scientific solutions, desperate to prove that intelligence can solve any problem if you just apply enough of it. She runs experiments and builds machines and consults ancient texts, and none of it works, and she cannot accept that none of it works, because accepting failure would mean accepting that her identity as the smartest person in any room has limits. She would rather exhaust herself pursuing impossible solutions than sit with the grief of helplessness. Marceline vacillates between despair and anger, unable to process the potential loss of someone she has known for centuries, someone who has been a constant in her impossibly long life. She picks fights with bubblegum over methodology. She snaps at Simon for his hesitation. She cannot grieve because Finn is not dead yet, but she cannot hope because hope feels like tempting fate. So she does neither. She bites logs instead. Simon Petrikov, newly restored to sanity after 1,000 years of madness as the Ice King, finds himself paralyzed by guilt that may or may not be justified. He believes his actions during his cursed existence somehow contributed to Finn's current state. He cannot articulate exactly how or point to specific moments of causation, but the guilt is there anyway, a weight on his chest that makes useful action impossible. He attends meetings but contributes nothing. He offers to help but follows through on none of it. He is so busy punishing himself for imagined sins that he cannot participate in the actual effort to save someone he claims to love. Meanwhile, in Fionna's mundane world, the pattern repeats with smaller stakes but equal psychological intensity. Fionna has convinced herself that saving the sweet spot will prove her worth as a hero. She has assigned cosmic significance to a bakery, treating its survival or failure as a referendum on her entire existence. And in pursuit of this goal, she neglects everything else that actually matters. Her relationship with Cake grows strained as she treats her best friend like support staff rather than a partner. Her finances collapse because she is too busy saving the world to pay her bills. Her romantic entanglements multiply and intersect in ways that promise future catastrophe. She is so focused on the log she has chosen to bite that she cannot see the actual crocodiles circling, cannot hear the warnings from people who love her, cannot process any information that contradicts her chosen narrative. The episode introduces us more fully to Huntress Wizard's arc, and here the fable takes on additional meaning. Huntress Wizard is arguably the most competent character in the entire Adventure Time franchise. Her skills are genuine, hard-won through years of solitary practice in conditions that would destroy lesser beings. She can track anything across any terrain. She can fight entities that would reduce most adventurers to smears on the landscape. She has mastered forms of nature magic that most wizards cannot even comprehend, let alone replicate. Her capabilities are not performance or pretense, but genuine expertise developed through genuine effort. And yet, even she is biting a log. Even she is fighting the wrong battle while the right one goes unaddressed. Huntress Wizard's log is her relationship with Finn. We learn in this episode that they are officially a couple, confirming what longtime fans had suspected since their first meaningful interaction in the original series all those years ago. But their relationship exists in a state of profound imbalance that neither of them seems to recognize or address. Huntress Wizard loves Finn with an intensity that frightens her, that threatens to undo all the emotional armor she has spent her life constructing. She has spent her entire adult existence avoiding attachment, avoiding vulnerability, avoiding the kind of connection that can destroy you when it breaks. And now she finds herself willing to cross dimensions and battle gods and sacrifice her own integrity to save one man. This terrifies her because she understands what it means. She has become vulnerable in a way she swore she never would be, and she has no idea how to handle the terror that vulnerability creates. Finn, by contrast, seems almost casual about their relationship, almost indifferent to the cosmic significance Huntress Wizard has assigned it. His scenes in the coma world show him repeating the same behaviours he exhibited as a teenager, charging into danger without thinking, making jokes at inappropriate moments, refusing to take anything seriously, because taking things seriously means confronting feelings he would rather ignore. Even facing death, even poisoned and comatose and surrounded by people desperately trying to save him, Finn cannot quite bring himself to be present. He deflects with humour, he pretends he is not afraid. He acts as though everything will work out, because everything has always worked out before, ignoring the mounting evidence that this time might be different. Huntress Wizard is fighting to save someone who may not fully understand what she is sacrificing, may not even be capable of understanding it, given his own psychological limitations. This asymmetry mirrors the relationship between Fionna and her world in ways the show invites us to notice. Fionna keeps throwing herself at problems that do not require her intervention, while ignoring the emotional needs of the people who actually depend on her presence. Cake spends the episode trying to connect with her best friend, trying to have real conversations about real feelings, and consistently failing because Fionna cannot stop performing long enough to listen. Gary and Marshall Lee accept Fionna's help with the bakery, but clearly wish she would just relax and be their friend instead of their saviour. Everyone around Fionna is asking for one thing, asking for her presence and her attention and her authentic self, while she insists on giving them another, insists on heroism when what they want is just her. The crocodile and log metaphor extends to the season's villains as well, refusing to exempt anyone from its observation. Queenie, the property developer who serves as Fionna's primary antagonist in her home world, is herself biting a log with every fibre of her being. She believes that accumulating wealth and property will fill whatever emptiness exists inside her, that if she just acquires enough, controls enough, dominates enough, the void will finally close. She pursues the sweet spot not because she needs it, not because its location is uniquely valuable, but because acquiring things is the only behaviour she knows. Her cruelty is performative, a mask over uncertainty that she cannot afford to acknowledge, because acknowledging it would mean confronting the possibility that everything she has done, everything she has accumulated, has not made her happy and never will. The episode's climax brings several of these threads together in a moment of brutal clarity. Huntress Wizard discovers that the poison killing Finn originated from her own actions, that in attempting to save him, she inadvertently made everything worse. The log she was biting was her own competence, her belief that she could solve any problem through sufficient effort and skill. Reality has shown her otherwise, and the revelation nearly destroys her, nearly sends her spiralling into the same kind of helpless despair that grips everyone else in Finn's orbit. Fionna, meanwhile, experiences a smaller but equally significant realization. She learns that the fundraiser she has been obsessing over is not actually in danger. Gary and Marshall Lee have already secured alternative funding through their own efforts and connections. Her heroic intervention was never necessary. She was fighting a battle that had already been won by people who did not need her help, who never asked for her help, who would have preferred she spend that energy on her own life instead. The log she was biting was the idea that her friends were helpless without her, and discovering they are not leaves her feeling more worthless than ever. If they do not need saving, what is she for? If she is not their hero, who is she? The questions have no answers she can accept, so she does not accept them. She moves on to the next log, the next battle, the next opportunity to prove something she cannot prove. By episode 4, the season has established its psychological vocabulary firmly enough that it can begin speaking in more complex sentences. The Cat Who Tipped the Box takes its title from a phrase that initially seems to reference Cake, whose storyline involves increasingly bizarre situations in her new mundane world, situations that test her ability to maintain her civilized persona when her feline instincts demand otherwise. But as the narrative unfolds, we realize the box being tipped belongs to everyone, that every character in this story is one bad moment away from spilling their carefully constructed contents all over the floor. The episode opens with Huntress Wizard continuing to reconstitute herself after a battle that scattered her essence across dimensions. The process is slow and painful and humiliating, forcing this most self-reliant of characters to depend entirely on others for her survival. We learn more about her backstory here, revealed through fragments and flashbacks that never quite coalesce into a complete picture, and what we learn is devastating. Young Huntress Wizard was an orphan, a feral child living in the wilderness, surviving on instinct alone, because there was no one to teach her anything better. She ate what she could catch. She slept where she could hide. She was an animal in everything but form, a creature of pure survival, without language or connection or hope. And then she was found. A gentle couple, drawn in a style different from anything else in the episode, discovered her in the forest and saw not an animal but a child who needed help. They took her in. They fed her and clothed her and spoke to her until she learned to speak back. They showed her love, patience, and acceptance that she had never experienced and did not know how to process. They helped her understand that she could belong to something larger than herself, that survival was not the only goal, that life could contain joy and meaning beyond the next meal. They gave her a name. They made her human, and then they died. A fire consumed their home while young Huntress Wizard watched, unable to save them, unable to do anything but stand outside and scream as the only people who had ever loved her burned. The scene is rendered in horrifying detail, the flames reflected in her eyes, the sound design emphasizing every crack and crash as the structure collapsed. She was alone again. She was feral again. But now she knew what she had lost, knew what was possible and had been taken from her, and that knowledge was worse than ignorance had ever been. This backstory recontextualizes everything we thought we understood about Huntress Wizard. Her extreme self-reliance is not strength but armor, built piece by piece in the aftermath of catastrophic loss. She refuses to depend on others because depending on others got the last people she loved killed. If she had not needed them, their deaths would not have destroyed her. If she had remained feral, remained animal, she would not have known what burning felt like, would not have understood that fire could take away everything that mattered. Her commitment to solitude is not preference, but protection, a fortress she has constructed around the part of her that still remembers what love felt like and cannot bear to feel it again. Finn represents her first genuine connection since childhood, the first time she has allowed anyone past the walls, and the terror that creates explains her willingness to tear apart the multiverse for him. She is not just saving someone she loves, she is fighting to prove that this time will be different, that this time her love will not end in flames. The parallel to Fionna is subtle but essential, requiring attention to notice, but rewarding that attention richly. Fionna was also, in a sense, orphaned. Her original authors, Ice King and later Prismo, created her without giving her tools for independent existence. They wrote her adventures, but not her interiority. They gave her a personality, but not the psychological infrastructure to support it. When their influence was removed, and her world became real, she was left with personality structures that no longer functioned, with behaviors that made sense in a narrative context, but created chaos in an actual life. She is as much an orphan as Huntress Wizard, abandoned not by death, but by the withdrawal of narrative support. And like Huntress Wizard, she has responded by developing maladaptive coping mechanisms, building her own kind of armor from different materials but serving the same protective function. Where Huntress Wizard withdraws, Fionna performs. That is the fundamental difference between their damage, the axis on which their contrasting psychologies turn. Huntress Wizard's armor keeps people out. Fionna's armor keeps people watching. Her entire personality is built around being seen as capable, lovable, and heroic, around ensuring that everyone in her vicinity recognizes her value and validates her existence. She cannot tolerate anonymity because anonymity means her existence lacks justification. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to prove her worth, and every failure becomes an existential threat that must be immediately countered with new performance, new heroism, new evidence that she matters. This is why she keeps pursuing DJ Flame, despite his clear disinterest and existing relationship. This is why she cannot accept that her friends do not need saving. If she is not performing heroism, she does not know who she is. The performance has become the identity, and without it, there is nothing. The episode depicts Fionna's box tipping through a series of increasingly poor decisions, each one following logically from the psychological damage that preceded it. She has a meeting with Hunter, who has gone out of her way to help Fionna's career and personal life, who has extended genuine friendship without asking for anything in return. Fionna forgets the meeting entirely, too consumed with her desperate need to help Huntress Wizard return to U, too focused on her current heroic project to remember the relationships she is supposed to be maintaining. When she finally remembers, hours too late, she lies about her reasons for missing it. The lie is obvious to everyone, including Hunter, whose disappointment is palpable and painful to witness. A potential friendship dies before it can truly begin, killed not by malice, but by the inability to prioritize anything except the current performance. Meanwhile, Fionna's pursuit of DJ Flame intensifies despite all evidence that this relationship is not meant to be, despite the existence of Fennel, his actual girlfriend. Fionna shows up at places she knows he will be, manufacturing coincidences that are not coincidental at all. She treats Fennel not as a person with her own valid claim, but as an obstacle to be overcome. The behavior is recognizable to anyone who has watched someone in the grip of romantic obsession, and the show refuses to glamorize it. She is crossing boundaries, she is disregarding consent, she is being genuinely unpleasant in ways that previous versions of this character were never allowed to be. The episode's genius lies in showing us exactly why Fionna cannot stop, cannot recognize what she is doing, cannot step back and see herself clearly. Her internal monologue, conveyed through conversations with Cake and reactions to events around her, reveals a mind convinced that one perfect outcome will fix everything. If she can just save the right person, win the right relationship, complete the right heroic act, the emptiness inside her will fill. This is magical thinking at its most destructive, the belief that external circumstances can heal internal wounds. It leads Fionna to increasingly desperate measures, to increasingly boundary-violating behavior, to an escalating pattern that can only end in collapse. Cake, meanwhile, experiences her own form of box tipping, in a subplot that initially seems comedic, but reveals deeper truths upon examination. She has taken a job on what appears to be a television production, but the cast and crew are mysteriously tiny, suggesting either that Cake has grown enormous, or that she has somehow entered a miniature world. The show never quite explains the mechanics, which is fine, because the mechanics are not the point. As the situation grows stranger, As the tiny people around her become increasingly obnoxious and demanding, Cake finds herself tempted to eat them. Her predatory cat instincts trigger in response to their size, in response to their movement, in response to everything about them that says prey rather than person. This subplot functions as dark comedy, but it also illuminates the episode's central theme. Cake is fighting against her fundamental nature, trying to be the person she has chosen to be when her instincts demand something else. She eventually masters herself, but the struggle is real and the outcome was never guaranteed. We are all one bad day away from reverting to our worst impulses. The episode climaxes with Fionna receiving an eviction notice, a consequence building since the season began. She has been so busy saving everyone else that she forgot to save herself, so focused on performing heroism that she neglected basic maintenance. And rather than processing this reality, Fionna immediately begins spinning the narrative. She will be the scrappy underdog fighting against an unjust system. She will make her failure into another performance, another layer of armor against the void. The box has tipped, its contents are spilling everywhere, and Fionna cannot even see the mess she is making. Episode 5 carries the weight of transition, the narrative equivalent of a deep breath before a plunge. The Wolves Who Wandered and the Dogs Who Stayed takes its title from a distinction that seems simple at first, but reveals increasing complexity as the episode unfolds. Wolves wander because wandering is their nature, because staying in one place means stagnation and death. Dogs stay because staying is their nature, because loyalty to a fixed point gives their existence meaning. But what happens when a wolf tries to stay or a dog tries to wander? What happens when the nature you were given no longer fits the life you are trying to live? Fionna's housing crisis has metastasized into something worse than mere homelessness. She has moved in temporarily with friends, cycling between couches and spare rooms, and her presence is already straining relationships that were not built to support this kind of sustained intimacy. The problem is not that Fionna is a bad house guest in the conventional sense. She does not leave messes or eat food that does not belong to her, or make unreasonable demands on her hosts. The problem is that she cannot simply exist in a space without immediately assuming responsibility for everyone in it. She reorganizes kitchens that do not need reorganizing. She offers advice that was never requested and becomes hurt when that advice is not taken. She inserts herself into household dynamics that function perfectly well before her arrival and will function perfectly well after her departure. The psychological term for this behavior is enmeshment, the inability to maintain appropriate boundaries between yourself and the people around you. Fionna has externalized her anxiety onto her environment, convinced that if she can just fix enough problems, she will earn the right to take up space. What she cannot comprehend, what her psychological damage prevents her from understanding, is that the people who love her do not want her fixing. They want her present. They want to simply be with her, to enjoy her company, to have conversations that do not become projects. But Fionna cannot give them that, because giving them that would require her to sit still, and sitting still means confronting the emptiness that lives at the center of her being. Huntress Wizard provides the counterpoint by demonstrating what happens when a creature of motion is forced into stillness. She is recovering from her interdimensional trauma in Fionna's mundane world, a place stripped of the magic that defines her existence. Her considerable abilities mean nothing here. She cannot hunt because there is nothing worth hunting in a world of grocery stores and delivery apps. She cannot fight because the threats that exist here are bureaucratic and social rather than physical. She cannot commune with nature because the nature in this world has been paved over and parcelled out and reduced to decorative parks, where her presence would raise questions she cannot answer. The episode depicts Huntress Wizard attempting to adapt to mundane existence with results that oscillate between comedy and tragedy. She tries grocery shopping and nearly has a panic attack in the produce section, overwhelmed by the abundance and the fluorescent lighting and the complete absence of challenge. She attempts to use a telephone and treats the device like a hostile entity that must be subdued before it can be trusted. She sits in a park and immediately begins tracking the movement of squirrels, her instincts scanning for threats and opportunities that do not exist in any meaningful sense. She is a predator in a world that has eliminated predation, a warrior in a world that has outsourced its violence to institutions, and the mismatch is destroying her from within. And yet, within this discomfort, growth begins to occur in ways neither character can recognize while they are experiencing it. Huntress Wizard observes Fionna's constant motion from the outside, from the perspective of someone who has no stake in the performances being conducted, and what she sees disturbs her. She recognizes the desperation beneath the helpfulness. She sees how Fionna's need to perform prevents her from actually connecting with the people she claims to be helping. She watches Fionna exhaust herself on problems that do not require her intervention, and wonders, perhaps for the first time, whether her own approach to life has protected her from a different kind of damage. Being present is not always preferable to being absent. Sometimes presence is just another form of escape, another way of avoiding the stillness that would force you to confront yourself. The episode introduces a subplot involving Hannah Abadir, Marshall Lee's mother, and this world's version of Hunson Abadir, the Lord of the Nightosphere. In Oo, Hunson is a demon of nearly infinite power, a being who has consumed souls and threatened apocalypses, and generally embodied everything terrifying about parental figures who cannot or will not put their children first. In Fionna's world, stripped of magic and cosmic significance, Hannah is simply a wealthy businesswoman with manipulative tendencies and a complicated relationship with her son. She is not evil in any supernatural sense. She is something arguably worse. She is ordinary evil, the kind that wears expensive suits and speaks in reasonable tones and destroys lives through paperwork rather than hellfire. Fionna's desperate need for approval makes her vulnerable to Hannah's manipulations in ways she cannot see happening. When Hannah offers to sponsor the Sweet Spot fundraiser, Fionna sees only the opportunity to be a hero again, to save her friends through a grand gesture that will validate her existence. She does not see the strings attached to Hannah's generosity. She does not understand that accepting help from someone like Hannah is not help at all, but debt accumulation, the conversion of goodwill into leverage that can be called in at any moment. By the episode's end, Fionna has entangled herself in obligations she cannot fulfill, in promises she should never have made, in a web of expectation that will eventually strangle everything she claims to care about. Meanwhile, in Oo, the effort to save Finn has grown increasingly desperate in ways that reveal character under pressure. Princess Bubblegum has exhausted conventional options and begun exploring solutions that make even Marceline uncomfortable. We glimpse her laboratory, filled with failed experiments and ethical compromises, machines that were built to help but have become instruments of desperation. She is a scientist who has built her identity around the conviction that any problem can be solved with sufficient intelligence and resources, and Finn's unsolvable problem is destroying that identity piece by piece. She is becoming someone she does not recognize, making choices she would have condemned in others, and she cannot stop, because stopping means admitting that her fundamental worldview is wrong. The episode's emotional core arrives unexpectedly in a conversation between Huntress Wizard and Fionna that neither character planned or wanted. They find themselves alone together, stranded by circumstance in a moment neither knows how to fill with the performance and motion that usually protects them. Huntress Wizard, who communicates primarily through action, struggles to verbalize observations that exist in her mind only as instinct and impression. Fionna, who communicates primarily through performance, struggles to stop performing long enough to actually hear what is being said. Their dialogue circles around truth without ever landing on it directly, approaching honesty and then veering away when honesty becomes too threatening. What emerges from this awkward exchange is a mutual recognition of damage that neither character can quite name. Huntress Wizard sees that Fionna is running from something she cannot identify, that all her helping and saving and fixing is motion designed to prevent stillness rather than motion designed to reach a destination. Fionna sees that Huntress Wizard is running from something she refuses to identify, that her solitude and self-reliance are armor against a wound that has never healed. Neither can help the other, because helping would require emotional vocabulary that neither possesses, tools for connection that were never included in their respective constructions. They are both wolves in their own way, both lost from whatever pack they might have belonged to, and recognizing this connection does not bring them closer. It simply makes their isolation more visible, more acute, more impossible to ignore. Episode 6 represents the season's first major turning point, an installment that fundamentally alters the trajectory of both protagonists while revealing truths about the Adventure Time universe that reframe everything we thought we understood. The bird in the clock is, on its surface, about time running out. Finn is dying. The poison spreading through his body has reached critical mass. Every second that passes brings him closer to an end that will devastate everyone who loves him and reshape the landscape of Ooo in ways that cannot be predicted or prevented. But the episode is really about something more intimate than cosmic stakes, something more personal than the death of a hero. It is about the violence we do to ourselves and others in the name of love, about how the desire to save someone can become indistinguishable from the desire to control them, about how devotion curdles into obsession when we refuse to accept limitations on what love can accomplish. The psychology of rescue fantasy runs through this episode like a fault line, threatening to crack open everything the characters have built. Huntress Wizard has organised her entire existence around the conviction that sufficient action can solve any problem, that if she just tries hard enough, fights hard enough, sacrifices enough, she can bend reality to her will. This conviction has served her well in countless situations. It has made her formidable. It has allowed her to survive losses that would have destroyed someone with a more realistic assessment of what individuals can achieve. But it has also prevented her from developing the capacity to accept outcomes she cannot change, to grieve losses she cannot prevent, to sit with pain rather than attacking its source. The episode opens in the dreamscape, where Fionna and Huntress Wizard have been drawn by forces neither fully comprehends. Dreams in the Adventure Time universe are not metaphors or subconscious processing or any of the things dreams represent in our world. They are literal places where literal consequences occur. You can die in a dream. You can be changed in a dream. The boundary between dreaming and waking is permeable in ways that make dreams genuinely dangerous, genuinely consequential, genuinely terrifying. And the most terrifying thing that can happen in a dream is a visit from the cosmic owl, whose appearance signals that death is approaching, that fate has made its decision, that the future has already been written. The cosmic owl has turned his attention to Finn. He is preparing to deliver what the show calls a croak dream, a prophetic vision that does not merely predict death but confirms it, locks it in, makes it inevitable. Once the cosmic owl appears in your dream, your death is no longer a possibility to be avoided, but a certainty to be accepted. The timeline may be unclear, the method may remain unknown, but the outcome is fixed. You will die, and you will die soon, and nothing you or anyone else does can change that fundamental fact. Huntress Wizard refuses to accept this. She has crossed dimensions and sacrificed her own integrity to save Finn, and she will not allow a bird, however cosmic, to undo her work with a simple appearance in a dream. Her plan is straightforward in conception and terrifying in implication. She will kill the cosmic owl. She will murder a god to save one man. She will assault the fundamental machinery of fate itself because she has decided that Finn's life matters more than cosmic order. And the show does not present this as heroic excess or romantic devotion taken to admirable extremes. It presents it as the logical endpoint of her psychological damage, the inevitable result of a lifetime spent solving problems through violence and self-reliance. When all you have is a bow and arrow, every problem looks like something that needs to be shot. The dream sequences that follow are among the most harrowing in Adventure Time history, a franchise that has never shied away from darkness, but rarely embraces it as completely as it does here. Finn dies repeatedly in increasingly grotesque ways. His body destroyed and reconstituted and destroyed again as the dream cycles through variations on his mortality. His blood is green in these sequences, the colour of the poison that is killing him in the waking world, and it splatters across impossible landscapes with abandon. Fionna witnesses each death, unable to prevent them, unable to do anything but watch as someone she has come to care about is murdered over and over by the mechanics of fate. The show commits to the horror fully, understanding that sanitizing it would undermine the point being made. This is what it costs to try to save someone. This is the damage that heroism inflicts on the heroes who practice it. Fionna accumulates trauma that was never hers to carry, watches horrors she was never meant to witness, and there is no guarantee that any of it will matter. There is no promise that the sacrifice will be rewarded, or the suffering will have meaning. There is only the moment, and the blood, and the desperate hope that this time will be different. Farmworld Finn joins them in the dreamscape, a grizzled survivor from an alternate timeline where everything went wrong. His presence reminds us that the Adventure Time franchise has always been concerned with the weight of choices, with the way small decisions cascade into enormous consequences. Farmworld Finn made different choices than the Finn we know, and those choices created a different person, harder and more cynical and more willing to accept loss as inevitable. He serves as both ally and warning in this episode, demonstrating what Finn might become if his current trajectory continues, if he survives but loses whatever softness makes him worth saving. The episode's climax occurs when Huntress Wizard confronts the cosmic owl inside a massive cuckoo clock, the kind of surreal imagery that Adventure Time deploys with such apparent effortlessness. The clock is filled with dead versions of Fionna from across the multiverse, echoes of all the ways this story could have gone wrong, reminders that survival is never guaranteed and often is not achieved. Huntress Wizard does not hesitate. She draws her bow and fires, and the cosmic owl falls, golden blood spilling from a wound that should not be possible to inflict. She has killed a god. She has murdered fate itself to save one man. And the show refuses to let this be triumphant, refuses to present it as anything other than the desperate act of a damaged person making choices she does not fully understand. The cosmic owl's death will have consequences that ripple across the multiverse. Huntress Wizard has broken something fundamental about how reality operates, and she does not care, cannot care, because caring about consequences would have prevented her from acting at all. This is love at its most destructive, devotion that has crossed the line into obsession, saving that has become indistinguishable from controlling. Fionna, meanwhile, experiences the episode's events from a position of increasing helplessness that mirrors and inverts her usual mode of existence. She wants to contribute but does not know how. She wants to be the hero but finds herself relegated to witness. Her usual strategies of helping and fixing and inserting herself into situations do not work here because the situation is beyond her ability to affect. She can only watch as Huntress Wizard makes choices that terrify her, as Finn dies repeatedly in dreams, as reality itself bends under the weight of desperate love. The experience changes her in ways the episode does not fully articulate, but which will become apparent as the season continues. There is a particular cruelty in being forced to watch someone else do the thing you have always done, and do it with more intensity and more consequence than you have ever managed. Fionna sees herself in Huntress Wizard's desperation, sees the same need to act, the same inability to accept helplessness, the same conviction that sufficient effort can overcome any obstacle. But she also sees where that conviction leads when it is not tempered by reality, when it is allowed to escalate without limit. Huntress Wizard has killed a god. She has broken fate itself. And Fionna cannot help but wonder whether she would have done the same thing given sufficient motivation, whether her own heroic impulses contain the same capacity for destruction when pushed beyond their limits. The episode ends with both characters changed in ways they cannot yet articulate. Huntress Wizard has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, has made herself an enemy of cosmic order, has demonstrated that her love for Finn has no limits, and that this limitlessness is not purely a good thing. Fionna has been forced into the witness position, has seen heroism from the outside for perhaps the first time, has begun the slow process of recognizing her own patterns in someone else's destructive behavior. Neither of them knows what comes next. Neither of them can see a path forward that does not involve more sacrifice, more violence, more desperate attempts to control outcomes that may be beyond anyone's control. Episode 7 shifts focus in ways that initially seem like narrative inefficiency, but reveal themselves as essential counterpoint to everything that has come before. The Wolves Who Watch the Fire takes its title from a behaviour observed in actual wolves, who will sometimes sit at a distance from flames and simply observe, neither approaching nor fleeing, held in place by a fascination they cannot explain or act upon. The fire threatens them. The fire could destroy them. Every instinct should tell them to run. And yet they stay, watching, transfixed by something that speaks to a part of their nature they do not fully understand. The episode applies this image to characters who have spent the season in constant motion, finally forcing them into the stillness they have been avoiding, finally making them watch the fires they have set and reckon with the damage they have caused. The human tendency to observe our own destruction without acting to prevent it is one of psychology's most troubling insights. We know what is bad for us. We can see the consequences approaching. We have the information and often the resources to change course. And yet we watch, paralyzed by something deeper than fear, something that might be fascination, or might be resignation, or might be a kind of dark comfort in knowing that the worst is finally happening. The episode explores this tendency through both of its protagonists, showing how different psychological architectures can arrive at the same paralysis through different routes. Fionna's entanglement with Hannah Abadir has reached a critical point that she did not see approaching because she was too busy performing heroism to notice the trap closing around her. The sponsorship that seemed like salvation has become leverage. The help that seemed unconditional has revealed its conditions. Hannah wants things from Fionna now. Favours and appearances and associations that will benefit Hannah's business interests while damaging Fionna's relationships. Saying no would mean admitting that she made a mistake, that her judgment was wrong, that her desperate need to be a hero led her into a situation she cannot escape, so she does not say no. She says yes to things she should refuse. She compromises in ways she should not compromise. She watches the fire she set and cannot bring herself to put it out. The episode explores the psychology of sunk cost through Fionna's increasingly poor decisions. She has invested so much in the Sweet Spot fundraiser, has made it so central to her identity as a hero, that abandoning it now feels impossible even as the costs of continuing become clearer. She has told herself a story about what this project means, about what completing it will prove, and that story has become more important than the reality it supposedly describes. She cannot see that the bakery would be fine without her intervention. She cannot accept that her friends have other resources, other options, other people willing to help. She has made their problem her problem so completely that solving it has become about her rather than them. Meanwhile, Huntress Wizard deals with the aftermath of killing the cosmic owl in ways that reveal the true cost of her choice. The death did not go unnoticed by the cosmic bureaucracy that oversees reality. Entities are taking interest in what happened. Questions are being asked about who did this and why, and what should be done about it. Huntress Wizard has made herself a target in ways she did not anticipate, because anticipating consequences has never been part of her approach to problem solving. She acts, she deals with the aftermath later. But the aftermath is here now, and it is larger than anything she has faced before. The episode introduces the concept of the heart of the forest more fully, revealing it as a source of life energy that connects all green magic across the multiverse. Huntress Wizard's powers derive from this source, as do the powers of other nature-based magic users throughout Adventure Time's cosmology. The heart is dying now, damaged by events that trace back to Season 1, and its death will have consequences beyond Finn's poisoning. The entire system of green magic is failing. Creatures and places that depend on this energy are withering. The wound that Huntress Wizard has been trying to treat is actually a symptom of something much larger, much older, much more fundamental than one human's illness. This revelation reframes Huntress Wizard's quest in ways she struggles to process. She thought she was saving Finn. She believed the scope of her mission was personal, romantic, contained, but the actual scope is cosmic. The actual stakes involve the survival of magic itself, and she does not know if she is capable of operating at that level, does not know if her skills and her determination and her willingness to kill gods translate to a problem this large. She has been a wolf her whole life, hunting individual prey, solving individual problems. Now she is being asked to save the forest itself, and she does not know how to begin. Fionna watching from her mundane world without magic or cosmic significance, experiences a parallel crisis of scale. Her problems have seemed so large to her, so consuming, so worthy of every ounce of her attention and energy. But compared to what Huntress Wizard faces, compared to the death of magic and the unravelling of reality, what is a bakery? What is rent? What is a complicated, romantic situation with an ex-boyfriend who has moved on? Her problems are not small, exactly, but they are human-sized. They are solvable through human means. And yet she has been treating them as though the fate of the universe hung in the balance. The episode's climax brings both characters to moments of reckoning that do not resolve, but instead deepen. Huntress Wizard accepts that her mission has grown beyond her original understanding, and chooses to continue anyway, not because she knows she can succeed, but because turning back is not something she knows how to do. Fionna accepts that she has been lying to herself about the importance of her projects, and chooses to continue anyway. Not because she has processed the lie, but because stopping would require confronting truths she is not ready to face. They are both watching the fire now. They can both see the damage they have caused and the damage yet to come. And neither of them can look away, cannot flee, cannot do anything but sit with the fascination and the horror and the knowledge that they are complicit in what is burning. The wolves are watching, and the fire is spreading, and morning seems very far away. The episode's final image lingers. Two figures, separated by dimensions, staring into flames they cannot extinguish. Huntress Wizard watches the literal fire of cosmic consequence, the reality-warping aftermath of killing a god spreading through the fabric of existence. Fionna watches the metaphorical fire of her collapsing life, the relationships burning, the opportunities turning to ash, the future she imagined becoming smoke. Neither moves to stop what is happening. Neither can move. They have spent so long running, so long acting, so long insisting that sufficient effort can overcome any obstacle. And now they have reached the moment where effort means nothing, where action is impossible, where all that remains is to watch and wait and hope that something survives the burning. This is the valley of the season, the lowest point before any possibility of ascent. Characters who defined themselves by motion have been forced into stillness. Characters who avoided reflection have been confronted with mirrors they cannot escape. The fires burn, the wolves watch, and somewhere in the smoke and ash, the possibility of transformation begins to take shape. But that transformation is not guaranteed. It is not inevitable. It requires something neither character has yet demonstrated the capacity to provide. It requires the willingness to stop watching and start changing, to turn away from the flames and walk towards something that is not yet burning. Whether they can find that willingness remains to be seen. Episode 8 arrives like a detonation, the moment when every slow building pressure finally exceeds what the structures containing it can bear. The insect that sang takes its title from the scarab, the cosmic enforcer who served as Season 1's primary antagonist, whose testimony in this episode sets off a chain of consequences that will reshape both protagonists in permanent ways. But the title also refers to something more universal, to the moment when creatures who have been silent finally speak, when truths that have been suppressed finally emerge, when the song that has been building in the dark finally bursts into the light, regardless of who wants to hear it. The episode opens with a stylized flashback that establishes mythology the show has been hinting at since the season began. We see the origins of the Green Wizards, a group of bandits who encountered the heart of the forest centuries ago and were transformed by its power. The heart offered them magic freely generously, without conditions or demands. It gave them abilities beyond anything they had imagined possible, and in return, they imprisoned it. They locked away the source of their power to ensure that power would never fade, never be reclaimed, never flow to anyone else. Their greed corrupted a gift into a possession, transformed gratitude into exploitation, turned the heart from a living being into a resource to be extracted. This backstory illuminates everything that follows in ways the characters themselves cannot see. The heart of the forest is dying because it was never meant to be caged, never meant to serve as a permanent battery for wizards who long ago stopped deserving its gift. The poison-killing Finn is a symptom of this larger death, a consequence cascading through systems that were damaged centuries before he was born. The problems the characters are trying to solve are not discrete challenges that can be addressed individually. They are manifestations of a single wound that has been festering for generations. A wrong that was done so long ago that everyone has forgotten it was a wrong at all. Fionna's storyline in this episode reaches its crisis point through a sequence of events that demonstrates exactly how her psychological damage translates into real-world consequences. She and Huntress Wizard are teleported without warning to a cosmic court, summoned to answer for the death of the cosmic owl. The court is presided over by Orbo, a bureaucratic entity who cares nothing for context or motivation, who sees only the fact that a cosmic being is dead and someone must be held responsible. Evidence is presented. Witnesses testify. The scarab appears, restored to his original form after the events of Season 1, and delivers testimony that is technically accurate but designed to maximize damage. Under this pressure, facing consequences she never anticipated, Fionna breaks in the worst possible way. She panics, she deflects, and in a moment of pure survival instinct, she shifts blame onto Finn, claiming that he was responsible for the cosmic owl's death rather than Huntress Wizard. The lie is transparent to everyone watching, including Huntress Wizard, whose expression of horror and betrayal is one of the season's most devastating images. Fionna has just thrown under the bus the person Huntress Wizard has sacrificed everything to save. She has made an enemy of her only real ally. She has demonstrated that when pushed to the wall, her instinct for self-preservation will override any loyalty or principle. This moment crystallizes everything the season has been building toward regarding Fionna's character. She is not a bad person. She does not want to hurt people. But she was constructed without the psychological infrastructure to handle genuine crisis. And when crisis arrives, she defaults to whatever behavior might make the immediate pain stop. She cannot think about consequences because her mind is too flooded with fear. She cannot consider other people's needs because her own need for survival has consumed all available bandwidth. She betrays Finn not out of malice, but out of the same desperate flailing that has characterized all her worst decisions this season. The aftermath of Fionna's testimony plays out in parallel with events back in her homeworld, where Cake has been left to manage the Sweet Spot fundraiser alone. This subplot, which could have been comedic relief, instead becomes a demonstration of everything Fionna is not. Cake faces obstacle after obstacle. The venue falls through. Key performers cancel. Donations dry up. Every problem that could go wrong does go wrong, and Cake handles it. She adapts, she improvises, she rallies the community around her through genuine connection rather than heroic performance. She saves the Sweet Spot not through grand gestures, but through the accumulation of small kindnesses, the patient work of someone who actually cares about the people she is trying to help. The contrast between Cake's success and Fionna's failure is not subtle, and the show does not pretend otherwise. Fionna has been so convinced that she is essential, that her friends cannot function without her heroic intervention, that the entire project would collapse without her leadership. And here is the proof that she was wrong. Here is evidence that her friends are capable and resourceful and do not actually need saving. They needed her presence, her friendship, her authentic self. They got her performance instead, and the performance was never what they wanted. When Fionna returns from the Cosmic Court, temporarily freed through her betrayal of Finn, she expects to find chaos. She expects the fundraiser to have failed without her. She expects vindication of her belief that she is necessary. Instead, she finds success. She finds a community that came together without her. She finds evidence that her entire self-concept is built on a lie. And rather than processing this information, rather than allowing it to change her, she destroys what they have built. The scene is shot with unflinching clarity. Fionna climbs into a bulldozer. She drives it toward the sweet spot. She demolishes the bakery that everyone worked so hard to save, the symbol of community and friendship that her friends constructed while she was busy performing heroism elsewhere. This is not an accident. This is not a misunderstanding. This is sabotage, pure and deliberate, the act of someone who cannot tolerate proof that they are not needed. If she cannot be the hero who saves the sweet spot, then no one will save it. If she cannot be essential, then she will make herself essential through destruction. The moment passes, and Fionna is left standing in the rubble, the horror of what she has done slowly penetrating the fog of her emotional breakdown. She did not mean to do this. She did not plan it. But she did it, and the doing cannot be undone, and everyone she loves saw her do it. Marshall, Lee, and Gary stand at the edge of the destruction, their faces showing not anger, but something worse. The dawning recognition that the person they thought they knew does not exist, that Fionna is capable of cruelty they never imagined. This is the lowest point of Fionna's arc, the moment when her psychological damage stops being sympathetic and starts being genuinely harmful to others. She has hurt people who loved her. She has destroyed something beautiful out of jealousy and insecurity. She has proven that the performances she has been giving all season were covering something ugly, something broken, something that cannot be fixed through heroism or helping or any of the strategies she has relied on to keep the void at bay. The void is here now. It has swallowed her, and everyone can see it. The episode does not offer Fionna easy redemption or quick forgiveness. It lets her sit in the wreckage of what she has done, lets the weight of her actions settle on her shoulders, without providing escape. Gary and Marshall Lee do not scream at her or denounce her. They simply look, and in their looking is a grief that cuts deeper than anger ever could. They trusted her, they loved her, and she has shown them what that trust and love meant to her when weighed against her own need to feel essential. The answer devastates everyone involved. Huntress Wizard, still processing her own betrayal at the Cosmic Court, watches from a distance. She has her own anger toward Fionna, her own sense of violation at being defended through Finn's sacrifice. But she also recognizes something in Fionna's breakdown, something familiar, something that speaks to her own capacity for destruction when pushed beyond her limits. She killed a god to save Finn. Fionna destroyed a bakery to save her ego. The scale is different, but the underlying mechanism is the same. When the pain becomes unbearable, you lash out at whatever is closest, regardless of whether it deserves your violence. This parallel does not excuse Fionna's behaviour. Nothing excuses it, but it contextualizes the behavior within a framework that allows for eventual understanding, if not forgiveness. Both women have been broken by circumstances they did not choose, have developed coping mechanisms that worked until they did not, have reached points where their damage spilled out and hurt innocent people. The question the episode leaves hanging is whether recognition of this parallel can lead to change, whether understanding why you hurt people can help you stop hurting them in the future. Episode 9 descends into territory that Adventure Time has always acknowledged exists, but rarely explored with this level of directness. The Worm and His Orchard takes its title from the karmic worm, a cosmic entity we have glimpsed in previous episodes, but now meet fully for the first time. The worm tends the undergrowth, a metaphysical realm where unprocessed trauma from across the multiverse manifests as physical objects, as red orbs hanging from personal trees, as fruit that must ripen before it can be digested. The imagery is dense with meaning, layered with implications about how pain works and how healing happens, and what it costs to avoid the reckoning that suffering demands. Fionna, Cake, and Huntress Wizard travel to the undergrowth together, drawn there by Huntress Wizard's need to find a path back to U, and by Fionna's need to understand memories she has glimpsed but not fully accessed. The realm is beautiful in a terrible way, lush with vegetation that grows from tears, fertile with soil enriched by grief. Everything here serves a purpose. The karmic worm explains that he consumes pain, processes it through his cosmic digestion, and returns it as something that can be integrated, something that the original sufferer can finally accept. He is not a healer in any conventional sense. He is more like a composter, taking the raw waste of trauma and transforming it into something that can nourish new growth. The concept is psychologically sophisticated in ways that reward attention. The show is suggesting that trauma cannot be eliminated, only transformed. The pain does not go away, the memories do not vanish. But they can change from something that poisons to something that feeds, from something that destroys to something that builds. This transformation requires time and process, and the willingness to let the pain be metabolized rather than repressed. It requires exactly the kind of sitting with discomfort that both Fionna and Huntress Wizard have spent their lives avoiding. Huntress Wizard's journey through the undergrowth forces her to confront her childhood in ways she has never allowed herself to do. We see the fire that killed her adoptive parents from her perspective, not as backstory, but as lived experience, the heat and the smoke and the screaming that still echoes in her mind decades later. We see the aftermath, the feral child standing alone in ashes, the decision to never let anyone that close again. Her tree in the undergrowth is gnarled and dense, heavy with orbs that represent every loss she has refused to process, every connection she has severed rather than risk, every wall she has built to keep the burning out. The karmic worm regards her tree with something like sadness. He has seen many trees, has processed pain from countless beings across infinite timelines. But Huntress Wizard's tree is notable for its density, for the sheer volume of unprocessed trauma it contains. She has been so effective at avoiding her feelings that she has accumulated a backlog that would take lifetimes to clear, and yet she keeps adding to it, keeps refusing to let anything ripen, keeps choosing the sharp clarity of repression over the messy work of actually feeling what she feels. Fiona's tree is different but equally revealing. Her orbs are fewer but stranger, filled with memories that do not quite fit together, experiences that feel artificial because they were artificial. We see glimpses of her original existence, the stories Ice King told about her, the narrative convenience that shaped her early adventures. We see the moment when her world became real and the confusion that followed, the sense that something was wrong without any framework for understanding what. Her tree is the tree of someone who was never taught how to process pain, because her original authors never imagined she would need to. The episode's emotional climax arrives when Fiona approaches the largest tree in the undergrowth, a massive structure heavy with orbs that she instinctively knows belongs to Finn. She has never met Jake, knows him only through stories, understands his importance to Finn only intellectually. But when she touches the largest orb on Finn's tree, she experiences a flash of memory that does not belong to her. Finn screaming, Finn in absolute agony, Finn experiencing something so terrible that even a momentary glimpse of it sends Fiona reeling backward. Fern intervenes before she can see more. The grass demon, who was once Finn's duplicate and is now something entirely his own. Fern has found peace in the undergrowth, has accepted his nature and his separation from Finn, has become a guardian of the realm rather than a tormented reflection. He warns Fiona that she does not want to see what is in that orb, that Finn's worst memory is not something anyone should witness without preparation. The implication is clear. Jake's death was not peaceful. Jake's death was not natural. Something terrible happened, something that broke Finn in ways that have never healed, something that explains his catatonic state and his desperate clinging to the unconscious. The show does not reveal what happened to Jake. It holds that mystery in reserve, allowing the horror of the unknown to do work that explicit depiction could not match. But it establishes that Finn's trauma is deeper than anyone realized, that his tree is one of the most burdened in the entire undergrowth, that the hero of Ooh has been carrying wounds that make Huntress Wizards look manageable by comparison. He has not dealt with his pain. He has pushed it down so far that it has become a foundation, a bedrock of repression, upon which his entire adult personality was constructed. And now that foundation is cracking. The episode ends with characters scattered across dimensions, separated by circumstances they did not choose. Cake remains in the undergrowth, with Fern and the karmic worm, her practical nature finding unexpected kinship with the realm's strange logic. She has always been more grounded than Fiona, more capable of accepting things as they are, rather than as she wishes they could be. The undergrowth speaks to something in her that Fiona's world never touched, a capacity for stillness and patience that has been underutilized in her role as sidekick and support. Huntress Wizard is trapped in the undergrowth as well, unable to return to Ooh because the heart of the forest there has died and no portal can form without its energy. The irony is bitter. She sacrificed everything to save Finn, crossed dimensions and killed gods, and scattered herself across realities, and now she cannot even reach him. She is stranded in a realm of processed pain, while Finn lies dying in a world she cannot access. Her competence means nothing here. Her determination changes nothing. She has never been more helpless, and the helplessness is teaching her things she never wanted to learn. Fiona returns to her world alone, carrying knowledge she cannot process, having glimpsed depths of pain that make her own suffering seem almost manageable. She saw Finn's worst memory, felt the echo of his agony, understood for the first time that her problems are not the only problems, that her pain is not the only pain, that the universe contains suffering on scales she never imagined. This perspective does not make her feel better. It makes her feel smaller, less significant, more lost in a cosmos that has no special interest in her survival or happiness. But it also plants a seed of something new, something that might eventually grow into humility, into the recognition that she is not the center of every story. They are all alone with what they have learned, separated by dimensions and circumstances, unable to help each other, even if they knew how. And what they have learned is heavy, is difficult, is the kind of knowledge that changes you whether you want to be changed or not. The healing they need is larger than any of them imagined. The work required is more than any of them knows how to do. But the episode ends with a strange kind of hope buried beneath all the devastation. They now know what they are dealing with. They now understand the shape of their wounds. And understanding is the first step towards something that might eventually, with enough time and enough courage, become repair. Episode 10 brings the season to what should be its breaking point, but instead becomes something more unexpected and more profound. The Bear and the Rose takes its title from symbols that have accumulated meaning throughout the franchise. Finn as the bear, strong and wild, and ultimately gentle despite his capacity for violence, and Huntress Wizard as the rose, beautiful and thorned and rooted in something deeper than herself. But the title also refers to the relationship between them, to the way they have circled each other across seasons and specials and spin-offs, never quite landing on the connection that both of them needed and feared in equal measure. The episode opens in Ooh, where Finn's condition has deteriorated beyond what conventional medicine can address. Princess Bubblegum has exhausted her options. The experiments have failed. The consultations have led nowhere. All that remains is a desperate plan that Bubblegum herself finds monstrous but cannot bring herself to abandon, uploading Finn's consciousness into a mechanical body, preserving his mind even as his flesh dies, transforming him into something that might survive but would not be alive in any sense he would recognize. Minerva, Finn's mother, has been called in as a last resort. She exists primarily as uploaded consciousness herself, having transferred her being into a digital substrate years ago to better serve her people. She understands what Bubblegum is proposing. She knows the costs and the benefits and the existential questions that such a transformation raises. And she is willing to do it, willing to see her son become something other than human if the alternative is losing him entirely. The love of a mother can justify almost anything, can rationalize almost any compromise, can accept almost any outcome that keeps her child in existence. The preparation for the upload proceeds with clinical efficiency that barely masks the horror underneath. Finn lies in a technological coffin, his dying body connected to machines that will attempt to capture and transfer everything that makes him himself. The process has never been attempted on someone so close to death. The risks are enormous. But Bubblegum and Minerva proceed anyway, because doing nothing is not something either of them can accept. Meanwhile, Huntress Wizard is racing across the multiverse, using the seeds of herself that she scattered in previous episodes to hop from dimension to dimension. Each seed grew into a version of her adapted to its local environment. Alternate huntresses, who share her essence but not her form. She calls upon each of them now, drawing their life force back into herself, sacrificing versions of her own being to accumulate enough power for what she needs to do. It is a kind of suicide multiplied across realities, a consumption of selves that would be horrifying if it were not also an act of ultimate devotion. She arrives in Ooh moments before the upload completes, crashing through the walls of Bubblegum's laboratory with the accumulated power of a dozen dead versions of herself. What follows is not a battle but a healing. Huntress Wizard, channeling everything she has gathered into Finn's broken body, pouring life force into wounds that science could not close. The poison recedes. The damage reverses. Finn's flesh begins to repair itself in ways that should be impossible, ways that require magic on a scale that no individual wizard has ever wielded. The cost becomes apparent as Huntress Wizard transforms. The power she is channeling is not hers to keep. It belongs to the heart of the forest, to the green magic that connects all living things, to the source that the green wizards imprisoned and that their imprisonment slowly killed. By becoming a conduit for this power, by allowing it to flow through her without trying to possess it, Huntress Wizard becomes something new. She becomes the new heart of the forest, a living embodiment of the magic that was dying, a replacement for what greed and fear had destroyed. This transformation is permanent. Huntress Wizard will never again be the solitary wanderer she was. She is rooted now, connected to every growing thing in Oo, responsible for the flow of life energy across an entire realm. Her relationship with Finn can continue, but can never be what either of them imagined. She has saved him by becoming something he cannot follow, has healed him by moving beyond the scale on which human relationships operate. Finn wakes, his body restored, his mind clear for the first time in what feels like forever. But he wakes into grief, into the knowledge that everyone has been fighting for him while he has been hiding from his own pain. His eyes meet Huntress Wizard's, and in that look, an entire relationship shifts. She has proven her love in ways that cannot be doubted. He must now prove himself worthy of that love, must finally face the pain he has been avoiding, must become someone who deserves what she has sacrificed. The scene that follows is unlike anything Adventure Time has shown us before. Fionna enters Finn's subconscious, guided by Bellamy Bug through landscapes of memory and imagination, searching for the part of Finn that retreated when Jake died. She finds him hiding in a chest, within a chest, within a chest, nested layers of protection around a core of unbearable loss. And she talks to him, not as a hero, not as a saviour, but as someone who understands what it feels like to be broken by something you cannot control. Jake appears in this internal landscape, not as a ghost, but as a memory, as the version of himself that Finn carries always. The reunion is quiet and devastating. Two friends who have been separated by death, saying goodbye in a space where goodbyes are possible. Finn finally allows himself to feel what he has been repressing, finally lets the tears come, finally accepts that Jake is gone and that being gone does not mean being forgotten. The orb on his tree in the undergrowth begins to glow, begins to rise, begins the long process of becoming something he can integrate rather than something that destroys him. Fionna watches this happen and understands something she could not have understood before her own breakdown. Healing is not heroic. Healing is not a performance. Healing is not the kind of thing you can do for someone else to make yourself feel valuable. Healing is the slow, painful, private work of sitting with what hurts until it stops hurting quite so much. She cannot save Finn. She never could have saved Finn. She can only witness his saving of himself, can only be present while he does the work that no one else can do for him. And in witnessing, in finally accepting the limitations of what she can accomplish for others, she begins to understand what she needs to do for herself. The episode returns to Fionna's world for its final movement, showing her attempts to make amends for the destruction she caused. She bakes a cake for Gary and Marshall Lee, a sad and ugly thing made with hot dogs and condiments, because she does not know how to cook and did not think to learn before attempting reconciliation. The gesture is pathetic in the original sense of the word, full of pathos, full of feeling that does not know how to express itself properly, and yet Gary accepts it, not because the cake is good or the gesture is sufficient, but because he can see that Fionna is trying, that she is doing something she has never done before, acknowledging her failures without trying to spin them into heroic narrative. She ends things with DJ Flame, finally accepting what she should have recognized from the beginning, that her pursuit of him was never about him at all, that she was chasing a feeling rather than a person, that she was trying to force a happy ending that neither of them actually wanted. The conversation is awkward and painful and nothing like the dramatic confrontations she might have imagined. It is just two people admitting that what they had was not working and probably never would. There is no villain in the story. There is only incompatibility and bad timing and the recognition that sometimes letting go is the only kind thing to do. The episode ends with Fionna sitting in the wreckage of her old life, contemplating the life she might build instead. Her apartment is gone. Her heroic reputation is shattered. Her relationships have been damaged in ways that will take years to repair if they can be repaired at all. But she is still here. She is still breathing. And for the first time in the entire season, she is not performing. She is not trying to prove anything or save anyone or convince herself that she matters. She is just sitting, just being, just allowing herself to exist without justification. It is the smallest possible step toward healing. But it is a step, and it is real, and the show trusts us to understand that sometimes the smallest steps are the only ones that matter. The season finale's aftermath deserves examination separate from the events themselves. A meditation on what it means when a story chooses healing over triumph. Adventure Time has always understood that endings are not really endings, that the conclusion of one arc is simply the beginning of another, that life continues past the moments we designate as climactic. The Bear and the Rose ends not with a bang, but with a breath, with characters sitting in the quiet that follows catastrophe, with the recognition that surviving is not the same as being whole, and that being whole is work that extends far beyond the frame of any single story. Finn wakes from his coma, changed in ways that will take seasons to fully explore, assuming the franchise continues in forms that allow such exploration. He has confronted Jake's death, has allowed himself to feel the grief he has been repressing, has begun the process of integrating his worst memory rather than hiding from it. But beginning is not completing. The orb on his trauma tree has started to rise, has started the journey toward becoming something he can live with, but that journey is measured in years rather than episodes. He will carry this wound for the rest of his life. The question is whether he will carry it as a burden that crushes him, or as a scar that reminds him of what he has survived. The show's refusal to provide complete resolution is not a failure of storytelling, but a commitment to psychological realism that elevates the entire season. Real trauma does not resolve in single conversations, however profound. Real grief does not lift because you have one good cry, however cathartic. The work of healing is repetitive and frustrating, and often feels like it is going nowhere, until suddenly you realize you have traveled further than you knew. Finn's journey toward acceptance of Jake's death will involve setbacks and regressions, and moments when the pain feels as fresh as it did on the day it happened. The finale acknowledges this by showing us the beginning of his healing rather than its completion, trusting the audience to understand that some stories are too important to rush. Huntress Wizard's transformation into the heart of the forest represents a different kind of ending, one that is simultaneously triumphant and tragic in ways the show does not try to reconcile. She has saved Finn. She has restored the flow of green magic across U. She has become something larger and more important than she ever was as an individual. But she has also lost herself in a fundamental way, has traded her autonomy for cosmic significance, has become rooted when her entire identity was built on motion and freedom. The woman who could not stay in one place is now literally unable to leave. The warrior who solved problems through action must now nurture growth through patience. Everything she was has been transformed into something she never imagined becoming. The relationship between Finn and Huntress Wizard survives her transformation, but cannot remain unchanged by it. They share a kiss that fans have been waiting years to see, a moment of connection that confirms what both of them have felt, but neither has been willing to fully acknowledge. But the kiss occurs across a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. She is the heart of the forest now. He is a human man with a human lifespan and human limitations. Their love is real, but the form it can take has been permanently altered by her sacrifice. They will have to build something new from the wreckage of what they might have been. We'll have to find ways to connect that accommodate her cosmic responsibilities and his mortal needs. This bittersweet resolution reflects the show's mature understanding of how love actually works in the presence of fundamental incompatibility. Sometimes you can love someone completely and still not be able to build the life you imagined with them. Sometimes sacrifice creates distance, even as it demonstrates devotion. Sometimes the proof of love is accepting that love is not enough, that connection requires more than feeling, that relationships need shared ground to grow, and some ground cannot be shared, no matter how much both parties wish otherwise. Finn and Huntress Wizard love each other. The show never questions this. But it also never pretends that love alone can bridge the gap between a mortal hero and the living embodiment of natural magic. Fionna's arc concludes with something that looks like failure, but functions as foundation. She has lost her apartment, her reputation, her romantic prospects, and most of her self-image. The heroic Fionna, who began the season convinced of her own importance, has been stripped down to something much smaller and much more honest. She is just a person now, a flawed and damaged person who has hurt people she loved and destroyed things she claimed to value. There is no narrative that can transform this into triumph, no spin that can make her actions acceptable, no heroic frame that can contain what she did to the sweet spot and to her friends' trust in her. And yet this stripping away is exactly what Fionna needed, exactly what her psychological architecture required to begin genuine reconstruction. She was built on foundations of fantasy and wish fulfillment, on the assumption that she was special and important and destined for great things. These foundations were rotten from the start, constructed by minds that wanted comfort rather than truth, and everything built on them was unstable. The collapse of her self-image is not a tragedy, but a necessary demolition, the clearing of ground that was never solid enough to support the weight of an actual life. What she builds next will be smaller but real, humbler but sustainable, based on who she actually is, rather than who she was written to be. The final scenes of the season show Fionna contemplating a world beyond the walls of her city, a vast, unexplored territory that the finale reveals has existed all along, but that she never thought to investigate. Her world was created small, was designed as a contained setting for the stories Ice King wanted to tell, and she accepted those boundaries without question. But now she knows the boundaries were artificial, that there is more to her reality than she was allowed to see, that the limitations she accepted were never real limitations at all. She can explore, she can grow, she can become someone who was never written into her original conception. This ending is hope disguised as devastation, possibility disguised as loss. Fionna has been broken, yes, but broken in ways that allow for reconstruction rather than permanent damage. She has lost everything, yes, but lost things that were never truly hers, that were given to her by authors who did not understand what she would need to survive as a real person in a real world. The Fionna who sets out to explore beyond the walls will not be the Fionna who began the season. She will be someone new, someone forged in the fire of her own failures, someone who understands that heroism is not performance, and that love is not saving, and that existence does not require justification. She will be, for the first time, genuinely herself. The revelation that her world extends beyond the city walls carries profound symbolic weight that the show trusts its audience to recognize without explicit statement. Fionna has been living in a story, has accepted the boundaries of that story as the boundaries of reality, has never questioned why the world seemed to end at the edges of the map. But stories have authors, and authors have limitations, and the limitations of Fionna's original authors created a world that was smaller than it needed to be. Ice King, when he wrote her adventures, was not interested in world building on a grand scale. He was interested in romance and heroism and the small dramas that filled his lonely fantasies. The world beyond the walls was never written, because he never thought to write it. Now Fionna can write it herself. Now she can explore territories that have no author, can encounter situations that no one imagined, can become someone that the original vision never anticipated. This is freedom of a kind that few characters ever achieve, the freedom to exceed your creation, to become more than you were designed to be, to claim authorship of your own story, even though you began as a character in someone else's. The show ends on this note of radical possibility, this suggestion that the constraints we accept may be constraints we can reject, that the walls we think define our world may be walls we can walk past if we simply decide to try. The parallel to the audience's situation is not accidental. We all live within stories we did not write, constrained by narratives about who we are that originated with others and became internalized. Our families told us stories about ourselves. Our cultures told us stories about what people like us are capable of. Our own minds told us stories based on experiences that may no longer be relevant. Fionna's discovery that her world is larger than she knew invites us to consider whether our worlds might be larger too, whether the boundaries we have accepted might be artifacts of limited imagination rather than genuine limitations. This thematic richness elevates the finale from satisfying conclusion to genuinely thought-provoking art. The show is not just telling a story about a cartoon woman and her cat. It is meditating on questions of identity and possibility that apply to anyone who has ever felt trapped by someone else's idea of who they should be. It suggests that the first step toward freedom is recognizing that the walls are there, that the second step is questioning whether they need to be, and that the third step is finding out what lies beyond them. Fionna takes all three steps in this finale. The question the show leaves us with is whether we might take them too. The post-credits scene of the finale introduces a threat that recontextualizes everything we have watched and sets up whatever comes next for the franchise. Hunsun Abadir, Lord of the Nightosphere, appears in Fionna's world, his presence unexplained and his intentions unclear. In U, Hunsun is Marceline's father, a demon of nearly infinite power who has threatened apocalypse on multiple occasions. and whose relationship with his daughter forms one of the original series' most complex emotional threads. His appearance in a world that should be inaccessible to him raises questions the finale does not answer, and perhaps does not intend to answer. The implications of Hunson's arrival extend beyond simple sequel baiting into territory that illuminates the season's themes in retrospect. Fionna's world was supposed to be protected now, was supposed to be canonical and stable and safe from the kind of cosmic interference that nearly destroyed it in Season 1. The appearance of a demon lord suggests that safety was always an illusion, that canonicity does not equal invulnerability, that the forces of darkness will find ways to reach you regardless of what protective status you think you have achieved. Fionna survived one existential threat only to face another, and this time she is weaker, more broken, less capable of the heroic response that saved her before. But there is another reading of Hunson's appearance, one that connects more directly to the psychological work the season has been doing. Marshall Lee is Fionna's world's version of Marceline, and Marshall Lee's relationship with his mother Hannah has been a source of pain and complication throughout the season. If Hunson has come for Marshall Lee, if the Demon Lord intends to claim some version of his child across dimensional boundaries, then the threat is not just physical, but emotional. Marshall Lee would have to confront questions of patrimony and identity that Marceline herself has struggled with across multiple series. The sins of fathers, the claims of family, the question of what you owe to parents who have hurt you. These themes could drive an entire additional season while remaining consistent with the psychological depth the show has established. The scene also raises questions about how Hunson crossed between dimensions and what that crossing means for the stability of the multiverse. Season 1 established that dimensional barriers exist for reasons that the cosmic bureaucracy maintains separation between realities to prevent various forms of catastrophe. If Hunson has found a way to bypass these barriers, others might follow. The careful categorization of canon and non-canon, real and unreal, that gave Fionna's world its protected status might be breaking down. The walls between worlds might be thinning in ways that threaten everyone, not just the inhabitants of one small, mundane city. This ambiguity is deliberate and effective, providing enough information to generate anticipation without committing to any particular direction. The show has earned the audience's trust that whatever comes next will be handled with the same psychological sophistication and emotional honesty that characterized this season. We do not know what Hunson wants. We do not know how Fionna will respond. We do not know whether the fragile peace the finale established will survive contact with demonic intervention. But we trust that the answers, when they come, will be worth the wait. The post-credits scene also functions as a reminder that trauma does not stop arriving just because you have started processing the trauma you already have. Fionna has barely begun to deal with the damage this season inflicted on her psyche, and already new threats are emerging that will demand response. This is how life works, the show suggests. You do not get to finish healing before the next wound arrives. You do not get to achieve stability before the next destabilization begins. You heal while you are being hurt, grow while you are being diminished, build while the ground beneath you shifts. The only alternative is to stop entirely, and stopping is not something the living can afford. Marshall Lee stands in his world, unaware that his demonic father has arrived, unaware that the complicated family dynamics he thought he had escaped are about to reassert themselves in the most dramatic possible way. His storyline this season has been about building a life with Gary, about establishing roots and community and the kind of stable love that neither of them experienced growing up. The arrival of Hunson threatens all of that, threatens to drag Marshall Lee back into patterns of dysfunction he thought he had outgrown, threatens to prove that you can never really escape your family, no matter how far you run. The cruelty of this timing, arriving just as Marshall Lee has achieved something like happiness, is precisely the kind of cruelty that life specializes in. The screen goes dark on Hunson's smile, a smile that promises nothing good and suggests everything terrible. The season ends not with resolution, but with the promise of further complication, not with peace, but with the certainty that peace was always temporary. This is appropriate for a show that has never pretended life gets easier, or that happy endings last forever. Adventure Time understands that the adventure continues past any given stopping point, that the time keeps passing regardless of where you choose to end your story, that the only true ending is the one none of us want to think about. The choice to end on threat rather than resolution reflects the show's mature understanding of narrative, rhythm, and emotional truth. A neat ending with all threats resolved and all characters safely positioned for happiness would have betrayed everything the season built toward. Fionna is not ready to be happy. Huntress Wizard is still adjusting to her transformation. Finn is only beginning the long process of integrating his grief. To suggest that these characters have reached stable endpoints would be to lie about how healing works, about how long it takes, about how many setbacks and complications intervene between starting to recover and actually recovering. The threat Hunson represents is not just physical danger, but the ongoing challenge of existence in a universe that does not pause for your convenience. You do not get to call time out while you process your trauma. You do not get to ask the world to wait while you figure out who you are becoming. Life continues to happen, regardless of your readiness, and the measure of growth is not whether you have achieved stability, but whether you can maintain forward motion despite instability. Fionna will have to face whatever Hunson brings while she is still broken. That is not unfair. That is simply how things work. The post-credits scene also serves a structural function by linking this season to potential future content, whether that content takes the form of another season of Fionna and Cake, or some other continuation of the Adventure Time franchise. The show has always been comfortable with open endings, with threads left dangling, with questions asked but not answered. This is not sloppiness or sequel baiting, but a philosophical commitment to the idea that stories do not really end, that every conclusion is also a beginning, that the most honest thing a narrative can do is acknowledge its own incompleteness. We leave the season with characters positioned for continued struggle, continued growth, continued story. Fionna will explore her expanded world while dealing with demonic intrusion. Huntress Wizard will learn what it means to be the heart of the forest while maintaining whatever connection she can with Finn. Finn will continue processing Jake's death while facing whatever new challenges Boo throws at him. Marshall Lee will confront his father's unexpected arrival while trying to protect the life he has built with Gary. These are not endings, they are pivot points, moments where momentum shifts and new trajectories become possible. Stepping back from the episode-by-episode analysis, we can see patterns in Season 2 that illuminate what the show is trying to accomplish and how successfully it achieves those aims. The parallel structure of Fionna and Huntress Wizard's arcs is not accidental but architectural, a deliberate construction that allows each character's journey to comment on and illuminate the others. They are mirrors facing each other, reflecting back distorted images that somehow capture truth more accurately than direct observation ever could. Fiona's arc moves from performance to authenticity, from the desperate need to be seen as heroic to the grudging acceptance that she is simply human. She begins the season convinced that her value lies in what she does for others, in the problems she solves, and the people she saves. She ends the season having destroyed more than she saved, having hurt more than she helped, having proven to herself and everyone watching that her heroic self-image was a fantasy constructed to avoid confronting the emptiness beneath. This sounds like tragedy, and in some ways it is. But it is also liberation, the breaking of chains she did not know she was wearing, the destruction of a prison she had mistaken for a palace. The psychological term for what Fiona experiences is ego death, the dissolution of the constructed self that we mistake for our true identity. It is terrifying and painful and feels like annihilation while it is happening. But it is also the necessary precursor to genuine growth, the clearing of ground that allows something real to take root. Fiona's ego, her sense of herself as special and heroic and essential, was built on foundations that could not support actual weight. It had to collapse before she could build something sustainable. The season documents that collapse with unflinching honesty, never pretending it is anything other than devastating, but also never losing sight of the possibility that devastation can become fertile ground. Huntress Wizard's arc moves in the opposite direction, from isolation to connection, from the refusal to depend on anyone to the ultimate dependence of becoming a living embodiment of interconnection. She begins the season as the most self-reliant character in the franchise, capable of solving any problem through her own skills and determination. She ends the season as the heart of the forest, literally incapable of existing separately from the web of life she now sustains. Her independence has been transformed into its opposite. Her solitude has become cosmic communion. Her carefully maintained walls have been dissolved into roots that spread through every growing thing. This transformation is not presented as simple loss or simple gain, but as genuine change, the kind that cannot be evaluated on a single axis of better or worse. Huntress Wizard has sacrificed her freedom and gained purpose. She has lost her ability to leave and gained the ability to nurture on a scale no individual could achieve. She has traded the sharp clarity of solitude for the diffuse warmth of connection, and the show does not pretend this trade is obviously good or obviously bad. It is simply what happened, the consequence of choices made under pressure, the result of love pushed past the point where it could remain contained within a single person's boundaries. The parallels between these arcs reveal something important about the show's understanding of psychological health. Neither extreme independence nor extreme interdependence is presented as the goal. Huntress Wizard was too isolated before her transformation, too committed to self-reliance as a defense against the pain of loss. Fiona was too enmeshed before her breakdown, too dependent on external validation to generate any sense of worth internally. Both needed to move toward the center, toward a balance between connection and autonomy that neither had achieved. The season breaks them in ways that force this movement, that make their previous patterns impossible to maintain, that leave them no choice but to grow or be destroyed. This is not gentle therapy. This is not the kind of gradual, supported change that mental health professionals recommend. The show subjects its characters to extremity, to crisis, to the kind of pressure that breaks people as often as it transforms them. But Adventure Time has always understood that its characters are not ordinary people living ordinary lives. They are heroes and wizards and cosmic entities, beings whose scales of experience exceed anything we might encounter in our mundane existence. The crises they face must be proportional to their natures, must challenge them at levels that would be inappropriate for more realistic fiction. Fionna needed to destroy something she loved to understand what she was capable of. Huntress Wizard needed to sacrifice her selfhood to understand what she was capable of. These are not lessons that could have been learned gently. The season's treatment of trauma is sophisticated in ways that reward attention and reflection. It does not present trauma as something that can be overcome through willpower or positive thinking. It does not suggest that talking about your feelings once will resolve decades of repression. It shows trauma as a permanent alteration to the psyche, something that changes who you are in ways that cannot be reversed, something that must be integrated rather than eliminated. Finn will always carry Jake's death. Huntress Wizard will always carry her parents' burning. Fionna will always carry the knowledge that she was constructed by someone else's imagination. These wounds do not heal in the sense of disappearing. They heal in the sense of becoming bearable, becoming part of the self rather than a foreign intrusion, becoming scars rather than open wounds. This understanding of trauma aligns with contemporary psychological research while remaining accessible to audiences who may not have any background in clinical theory. The show teaches without lecturing, demonstrates without explaining, trusts its audience to recognize truth when they see it enacted rather than described. This is storytelling at its most effective, using the tools of narrative to convey insights that would lose their power if reduced to propositional statements. You cannot summarize what Fionna learns about herself in a sentence. You cannot capture Huntress Wizard's transformation in a thesis statement. You can only watch it happen, feel it happening, recognize in these fictional experiences something that rhymes with your own. The season also demonstrates remarkable craft in its handling of tone, balancing darkness and humour in ways that prevent either from overwhelming the other. Adventure Time has always been tonally complex, willing to pivot from absurdist comedy to genuine horror within single episodes, trusting its audience to follow these shifts without becoming confused or alienated. Season 2 pushes this complexity further than ever before, presenting scenes of genuine psychological devastation alongside moments of pure, absurdist joy. Cake's subplot with the tiny television production is hilarious, even as Fionna's life collapses around her. The dream sequences are nightmarish, even as they contain callbacks and references that delight long-time fans. The show refuses to choose between entertaining and challenging, insisting that it can be both simultaneously. This tonal range reflects something true about lived experience that more narrowly focused shows cannot capture. Real life is not consistently dark or consistently light. Real crises are interrupted by moments of absurdity. Real grief coexists with real joy, often within the same hour. The person who just received devastating news still notices that the song on the radio is catchy. The person in the middle of a breakthrough in therapy still has to go to the bathroom. Life does not pause its mundane operations for our emotional convenience, and the best art acknowledges this by allowing multiple registers to coexist without cancelling each other out. The animation quality throughout the season deserves mention, particularly the stylized sequences that open many episodes and establish mythological backstory. These segments are rendered in styles distinct from the main narrative, creating visual variety that rewards attention. The backstory of the Green Wizards looks like illuminated manuscript. Huntress Wizard's childhood memories look like children's book illustration. These visual choices connect form to content in ways that enhance understanding. The voice performances carry emotional weight that the writing makes possible but cannot guarantee. Madeline Martin brings genuine vulnerability to Fiona's breakdown. Ashley Birch gives Huntress Wizard a groundedness that makes her transformation genuinely moving. Jeremy Shader, in his limited scenes as adult Finn, conveys decades of accumulated pain beneath surface cheer. These performances elevate already strong material into something approaching genuine art. The season ultimately succeeds by taking its characters seriously, by treating their psychological struggles as genuinely important rather than as obstacles to be overcome so the plot can advance. Too much animation treats character psychology as a problem to be solved rather than a reality to be explored. Fionna and Cake Season 2 refuses this shortcut, insists that the internal lives of its characters matter as much as the external events they navigate, commits to psychological realism, even when that realism makes the story harder to tell and harder to watch. This commitment is what distinguishes the show from its lesser competitors, what makes it worthy of the attention and analysis it receives, what ensures that it will be remembered long after flasher but shallower shows have been forgotten. The relationship between Fionna and Cake deserves dedicated examination because it forms the emotional backbone of the series, even when other relationships dominate the narrative foreground. They are best friends in the truest sense, companions who have been together so long that they have become extensions of each other, two halves of a whole that neither fully recognizes as incomplete. But Season 2 tests this relationship in ways that previous content never attempted, pushing both characters to their limits and revealing fractures in a bond that seemed unbreakable. Cake's arc through the season is quieter than Fionna's, but no less significant for its subtlety. She begins the season in a position of stability that Fionna cannot match, having found her own apartment and begun building a life that does not centre entirely on her best friend's needs. This independence is healthy and necessary, a recognition that even the closest relationships require space, that love does not mean constant presence, that caring for someone includes allowing them to develop separately from you. But it also creates distance that Fionna experiences as abandonment, as evidence that even Cake does not need her as much as she thought. The show handles this dynamic with remarkable nuance, never suggesting that either character is wrong, but showing how their different needs create friction. Cake needs independence to grow. Fionna needs closeness to feel secure. These needs are not compatible in their current forms, and the season documents the slow process of renegotiation that healthy relationships require when circumstances change. Cake does not stop loving Fionna. Fionna does not stop valuing Cake, but they must find new ways of expressing that love that accommodate who they are becoming rather than who they used to be. Cake's romantic subplot with a human man named Ellis provides external pressure that accelerates this renegotiation. The relationship is strange by any standard, a shape-shifting magical cat dating a regular human in a world that has been stripped of magic and wonder. The show plays this strangeness for comedy at times, but also takes it seriously as a genuine exploration of what connection means across difference. Ellis does not fully understand what Cake is. Cake does not fully understand what it means to be in a relationship with someone who cannot follow her into magical adventures. They are figuring it out together, making mistakes, learning from those mistakes, building something that has no template. Fionna's reaction to this relationship reveals her possessiveness in ways she cannot see, but the audience cannot miss. She is not jealous in a romantic sense. She does not want Ellis for herself. But she is jealous of the attention, jealous of the energy Cake invests in someone other than her, jealous of evidence that Cake has a life that does not revolve around Fionna's needs. This jealousy manifests as passive aggression, as subtle undermining, as the kind of behavior that damages relationships slowly rather than destroying them all at once. Fionna never says she resents Cake's independence. She does not have to. Her actions speak clearly enough. The crisis at the sweet spot brings this tension to a head in ways that transform both characters. When Fionna is absent, dealing with cosmic court and interdimensional travel, Cake steps up to save the fundraiser. She does not do this because Fionna asked her to, or because she feels obligated to complete Fionna's project. She does it because she cares about Gary and Marshall Lee, because the community matters to her independently of Fionna's involvement, because she is capable of heroism that does not require Fionna's presence or validation. This is the most significant thing Cake does all season, and she does it entirely on her own terms. The success of Cake's solo effort forces a reckoning that Fionna's breakdown only amplifies. Fionna destroyed the bakery. Cake saved it first. The sequence of events makes clear that Fionna's heroism has become more destructive than Cake's quiet competence, that the sidekick has exceeded the hero, that the relationship's implicit hierarchy no longer reflects reality. This reversal is not played for triumph or humiliation, but for the complicated emotions it actually produces. Cake does not want to be better than Fionna. She wants Fionna to be okay. But she cannot make Fionna okay through subordination, cannot heal her friend by pretending to be less capable than she is. The separation that occurs in the season's final episodes, with Cake remaining in the undergrowth while Fionna returns to her world, provides both characters with necessary space. They have been together so constantly, so completely, that neither has had room to discover who they are independently. The forced separation is painful but potentially productive, an opportunity for each to develop aspects of themselves that the other's presence had been suppressing. Cake can explore her connection to realms beyond the mundane. Fionna can learn to exist without her constant companion. Both can miss each other in ways that clarify what their relationship actually means. The show's treatment of this friendship avoids the trap that catches many stories about female relationships. The assumption that women's friendships are either perfect and supportive or toxic and competitive with nothing in between. Fionna and Cake's relationship is messy and complicated and sometimes harmful, precisely because it is real, because real relationships contain multitudes, because loving someone does not prevent you from hurting them or being hurt by them. The season honours their bond by subjecting it to pressure rather than protecting it from examination. What survives that pressure will be stronger than what existed before. What does not survive was perhaps not as strong as it appeared. The final image of Fionna setting out to explore beyond the city walls, notably, does not include Cake at her side. This is deliberate and significant, a visual statement that Fionna must take this next step alone, must discover who she is without her constant companion, before she can return to that companion as a whole person. The adventure continues, the show promises, but it continues in a new configuration, with new rules, with a recognition that the partnership which defined both characters must evolve if it is to survive. Fionna and Cake will find their way back to each other. The show gives us no reason to doubt this, but the path back will require both of them to become more than they were, to grow past the limitations that their closeness had allowed them to ignore. The separation also allows each character to discover capabilities that the other's presence had obscured. Cake in the Undergrowth connects with magical realms in ways that her mundane life with Fiona never permitted. She finds kinship with Fern and the karmic worm, discovers aspects of herself that only emerge in the presence of the genuinely strange. Her shape-shifting abilities, which seemed like comic relief in the mundane world, take on new significance in a realm where physical form is fluid and identity is negotiable. She becomes more fully herself by being somewhere that Fiona cannot follow. Fiona, left alone, must learn to fill the space that Cake's absence creates. She must make decisions without checking with her partner, must face consequences without someone to share them, must discover whether she can function as a complete person, or whether she has been half of something that cannot survive division. This is terrifying for someone whose identity has always been relational, whose sense of self has always depended on being part of a pair. But it is also necessary, a crucible through which she must pass to emerge as someone capable of genuine partnership rather than desperate codependence. The show trusts that their bond is strong enough to survive this separation and be strengthened by it. Real friendship does not require constant contact. Real love does not demand permanent presence. The deepest connections are those that can stretch across distance and time, that remain vital even when circumstances prevent proximity. Fionna and Cake have this kind of connection, have always had it, but they have never been required to prove it until now. The proof will come in their reunion, whenever that reunion arrives. Until then, they carry each other in memory and hope, in the knowledge that somewhere across dimensions, their best friend is also struggling, also growing, also becoming someone worthy of the love they share. The question of what Fionna and Cake Season 2 means for the broader Adventure Time franchise requires consideration of how this spin-off relates to content that came before and content that might come after. The original Adventure Time series ran for 10 seasons and accumulated a mythology so dense that no single viewer could catch every reference or understand every implication. Distant Lands expanded that mythology in 4 feature-length specials that filled gaps and answered questions while raising new ones. Now Fionna and Cake has added another layer, another set of characters and conflicts, another piece of a puzzle that may never be complete. The franchise has always operated on the assumption that its audience will do the work of connection, will remember details from episodes that aired years ago, will recognise callbacks and foreshadowing and thematic rhymes. This assumption is both strength and weakness, creating depth for dedicated viewers, while potentially alienating newcomers who lack the necessary context. Fionna and Cake Season 2 pushes this assumption further than ever, incorporating references to original series episodes, to Distant Lands specials, to moments that aired over a decade ago, and that even devoted fans might have forgotten. The season rewards this accumulated knowledge while remaining accessible to viewers who lack it. You do not need to have seen every episode of Adventure Time to understand Fionna's psychological journey or Huntress Wizard's sacrifice. The emotional beats land regardless of whether you recognise the specific references that accompany them. But if you do recognise those references, if you remember Finn and Huntress Wizard's first meeting, or the original appearance of the Cosmic Owl, or the backstory of Fern, the season gains additional resonance that transforms good storytelling into great storytelling. This layered approach reflects a philosophy of franchise management that trusts audiences to engage at whatever level they choose. Casual viewers can enjoy the surface narrative. Dedicated fans can excavate the depths. Neither experience is more valid than the other, and the show is designed to support both simultaneously. This is harder than it looks, requiring careful calibration of how much information to assume, how much to explain, how much to leave for viewers to discover on their own. Fionna and Cake Season 2 mostly succeeds at this calibration, though there are moments when the density of reference threatens to overwhelm the immediate story. The implications of this season for future Adventure Time content are significant, if uncertain. The post-credits scene with Hunts and Abadir clearly sets up potential continuation, whether in a third season of Fionna and Cake or in some other format. The announced projects Heyo BMO and Adventure Time side quests suggest that Cartoon Network and HBO Max remain committed to the franchise in various forms. But the specific future of Fionna and Cake as characters remains unconfirmed, leaving fans to speculate about where their journey might lead. The season's ending positions the franchise for multiple possible directions. A third season of Fionna and Cake could follow Fionna's exploration of her expanded world while dealing with Hunson's intrusion and the ongoing consequences of her breakdown. Alternatively, the franchise could pivot to other characters while leaving Fionna and Cake's story at this natural resting point. The open-ended nature of the conclusion allows for either option, neither forcing continuation nor preventing it. What seems clear is that Adventure Time as a franchise has found a sustainable model for continuation that does not require the original series to return in its original form. Spin-offs and specials allow the mythology to expand while introducing new perspectives and tones. Fionna and Cake's more adult sensibility reaches audiences who have aged out of the original show's target demographic. Future projects can target younger viewers or different sensibilities while remaining part of the same interconnected universe. The franchise has become a platform rather than a single show capable of supporting multiple simultaneous expressions of its core themes and aesthetics. This evolution mirrors changes in how audiences consume animated content, with streaming platforms creating opportunities for serialized storytelling that network television could not support. The original Adventure Time aired on Cartoon Network in 11-minute episodes that had to function as both standalone stories and pieces of larger arcs. Fionna and Cake, created for streaming, can assume that viewers will watch episodes in order and remember what happened previously. This assumption enables deeper serialization, more complex character development, more ambitious narrative structures. The show takes full advantage of these possibilities, telling stories that could not have been told in the original format. The shift from network to streaming also allows for tonal maturity that would have been impossible in Adventure Time's original context. Fionna and Cake carries a TV-14 rating and earns it through content that includes genuine, psychological horror, frank discussions of trauma and mental health, and emotional intensity that the original show could only hint at. This is not darker for darkness's sake, but darker because the stories being told require it, because the psychological excavation the show undertakes cannot be conducted in bright, cheerful lighting. The franchise's willingness to evolve, rather than simply repeat, demonstrates a creative confidence that many long-running properties lack. Adventure Time could have continued indefinitely in its original form, producing more episodes of Finn and Jake adventuring through Ooo until audiences lost interest or the creative team burned out. Instead, it chose to end, to transform, to find new ways of exploring the same themes with different characters in different contexts. This choice involves risk, the risk that new directions will not find audiences, that changes will alienate existing fans, that evolution will be perceived as betrayal rather than growth. Fionna and Cake Season 2 represents that risk paying off, demonstrating that the franchise can grow without losing its essential character, can mature without abandoning its roots, can tell new stories while honouring old ones. The season is unmistakably Adventure Time. In its visual style, its sense of humour, its willingness to balance absurdity with emotional depth. But it is also something new, something that could not have existed within the original show's constraints, something that expands the franchise's range while remaining faithful to its spirit. The success of this approach suggests a model that other long-running franchises might consider. Rather than endless continuation or hard reboot, Adventure Time has found a middle path. Transformation through spin-off, evolution through variation, growth through multiplication. The original show remains complete, a finished work that will not be diluted by inferior continuation. But the world it created remains alive, available for exploration from new angles, capable of supporting new stories that honour what came before while adding to it. Whether future projects maintain this balance remains to be seen. The announced Heyo BMO targets younger audiences and may lack the psychological depth that makes Fionna and Cake rewarding for adults. Adventure Time side quests returns to Finn and Jake, risking the diminishment that often accompanies unnecessary continuation. But the franchise has earned the benefit of the doubt through the quality of what it has produced so far. If side quests and Heyo BMO maintain the standard that Distant Lands and Fionna and Cake have established, the Adventure Time universe will continue to be one of the richest and most rewarding in all of animation. The legacy of Adventure Time extends beyond its own content into the broader landscape of animated storytelling. The original series demonstrated that cartoons could be philosophically ambitious, emotionally complex, and narratively sophisticated, while remaining accessible and entertaining. It inspired a generation of creators who grew up watching it to push the boundaries of what animation could achieve. Shows like Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, and The Owl House owe debts to Adventure Time's demonstration that young audiences could handle complexity and ambiguity. Fionna and Cake Season 2 continues this legacy by demonstrating that animated content can mature alongside its audience, that the same universe can support both children's entertainment and adult psychological drama, that growing up does not require leaving behind the stories that shaped you. The viewers who discovered Adventure Time as children are adults now, facing adult problems, carrying adult wounds. Fionna and Cake meets them where they are, offers them stories that speak to their current struggles, proves that the franchise they loved has grown as they have grown. What remains after the analysis is complete, after every episode has been examined and every theme has been traced, is the emotional residue that great storytelling leaves behind. Fionna and Cake Season 2 is not just a well-constructed narrative or a sophisticated psychological study or a worthy addition to a beloved franchise. It is an experience that changes something in the viewer, that deposits something in the psyche that was not there before, that makes you see your own life slightly differently in ways you may not be able to articulate. The season's central insight, if it can be reduced to a single statement, is that the person you think you are may be a story someone else wrote, and that becoming yourself requires recognizing this story and then deciding to write your own. Fionna was literally written by other minds, her personality and circumstances determined by authors who did not consider what she would need to exist as a real person. But in a less literal sense, we are all written by other minds, shaped by parents and cultures and experiences that we did not choose, moulded into patterns that may or may not serve our genuine flourishing. The work of becoming yourself is the work of recognizing these patterns and choosing which to keep and which to revise. This insight arrives not through lecture, but through immersion, through watching Fionna struggle with a version of the problem that makes visible what is usually invisible. We see her constructed nature because the show makes it explicit. We see her patterns because the narrative traces them episode by episode. We see her breakdown and her tentative reconstruction, her worst moments and her fragile hopes. And in seeing her, we see ourselves, or at least we see aspects of ourselves that usually hide beneath the smooth surface of assumed identity. Huntress Wizard provides a different entry point to similar insights. Her story is about walls and the cost of maintaining them, about the way protection becomes prison when it is too complete, about the choice between safety and connection that every wounded person eventually faces. She built herself into a fortress after her parents died, became someone who needed no one, proved her strength through solitude, and then love breached the walls, and she had to decide whether to rebuild them or to accept the vulnerability that their absence created. Her transformation into the heart of the forest represents a radical acceptance of interdependence, a recognition that connection is not weakness, but the fundamental nature of existence. She becomes literally incapable of isolation, rooted into a network of living things that depends on her as she depends on it. This is terrifying from one angle, the loss of the independence she valued so highly. But it is also liberation, release from the endless labour of maintaining walls that were always going to crumble eventually. She trades one kind of freedom for another and discovers that the trade was worth making. These character journeys resonate because they speak to experiences that transcend the specific circumstances of animated fantasy. Most of us have built walls. Most of us have performed identities that were given to us rather than chosen. Most of us have hurt people we loved because our damage overflowed its containment. The show does not offer easy solutions to these universal struggles. It does not suggest that a single season of growth will resolve decades of maladaptive patterns. But it does suggest that change is possible, that walls can come down, that new stories can be written over the old ones. The format of sleep content adds another layer to how these insights land. Watching for relaxation, watching at the edge of consciousness, watching as transition between waking and dreaming, the boundaries between the story and the viewer become more permeable. Ideas that might be resisted in full alertness slip through when defences are lowered. The show's themes seep into the mind rather than being consciously processed, depositing themselves in places that daylight logic cannot reach. This is not manipulation, but invitation, an opening of channels through which truth can flow. The night holds space for confrontation that day makes difficult. In darkness, alone with a screen and a voice, the possibility of change feels more real than it does in bright, crowded, waking life. The defences we maintain against self-knowledge relax. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are lose some of their grip. We become, briefly, capable of seeing ourselves as we are rather than as we prefer to appear. The show meets us in this vulnerable space and speaks to what it finds there, speaks gently but honestly, speaks with the compassion that only genuine understanding can produce. This is why sleep content works when it works, why the format Davide has developed resonates with audiences seeking more than passive entertainment. The combination of psychological depth and contemplative pacing creates conditions for a particular kind of reception, a state between waking analysis and dreaming absorption where insights can take root without being rejected by conscious defenses. The show provides the content, the format provides the container. Together they create an experience that changes something in the listener, deposits something that was not there before, opens possibilities that daylight logic keeps closed. Fionna's journey through Season 2 mirrors the journey that engaged viewers take alongside her. She begins defended, performing, convinced that she knows who she is and what she needs. She encounters challenges that her defenses cannot handle. She breaks down, spectacularly and publicly, in ways that reveal the hollowness beneath her performances. And then, in the wreckage of who she thought she was, she finds the first fragile shoots of who she might become. This is the pattern of genuine growth, the death and rebirth that transformation requires. And watching it happen to a fictional character gives us permission to imagine it happening to ourselves. Huntress Wizard's journey offers a different model of the same process. She begins defended in a different way, withdrawn rather than performative, isolated rather than enmeshed. Her challenges require different responses, demand connection rather than independence, push her toward others rather than toward herself. Her transformation is more dramatic, more visible, more clearly a matter of becoming something entirely new. But the underlying pattern is the same. The old self must die for the new self to be born, and the dying is painful regardless of what form it takes. These parallel journeys create space for viewers to find themselves in one character or the other, or in both, or in neither. The show does not insist on a single interpretation or a single path. It presents possibilities and trusts its audience to take what they need, to find the resonances that speak to their specific situations, to use the fictional material as raw stuff for their own very real growth. This trust is generous and somewhat rare, reflecting a creative team that respects its audience enough to avoid heavy-handed messaging. Fionna and Cake Season 2 ends, but its ending is also a beginning, an invitation to carry what you have received into whatever comes next. The characters will continue their journeys in whatever form the franchise takes. We will continue ours in whatever form our lives take. The connection between these journeys, the resonance that links animated fiction to lived experience, does not end when the credits roll. It persists, changes, grows, becomes part of who we are and how we understand ourselves. Sleep now, dream of walls coming down and worlds expanding. Dream of pain that becomes fertile ground rather than poison. Dream of who you might become if you decided to write your own story instead of living in stories others wrote for you. The adventure continues. It always continues. And somewhere in the continuing, in the perpetual unfolding of experience and growth and struggle and rest, you might find that you have changed without noticing, that the seeds the show planted have begun to sprout in soil you did not know was ready, that the Fionna you were has started becoming the Fionna you choose to be. This is what stories are for. This is why we tell them, why we listen to them, why we return to them again and again across the years of our lives. Stories carry us when we cannot carry ourselves. Stories show us possibilities we could not imagine alone. Stories connect us to others who have struggled as we struggle, who have hoped as we hope, who have broken and healed and broken again as we all must do. Fionna and Cake is a story about stories, about being written and writing back, about the courage it takes to become the author of your own existence. May you find that courage, may you write well, and may you rest now, in the space between stories, gathering strength for whatever adventure comes next.